Welkom bij de allereerste editie van de Cinetree Masterclass en we hebben niemand minder te gast dan Ken Loach. Fantastische Britse regisseur van onder andere The Wind That Shakes the Barley, I, Daniel Blake.
You must continue to look for work or your benefit payments will be frozen.
There must be some mistake.
En sinds kort nog in de bioscoop, Sorry We Missed You.
There's always someone on your back, isn't there?
Come on, we've got time to make up, let's go.
I'd rather work on my own now and be my own boss.
Nou, Ken Loach is een hele indrukwekkende filmmaker. Al zijn films behandelen altijd sociale thema's. En hij won maar liefst 2 keer de Palme d'Or in Cannes. Ik vroeg Ken over hoe hij zelf is begonnen als filmmaker, wat hem drijft, maar ook welk advies hij heeft voor alle andere jonge filmmakers. Kijk mee, Ken Loach.
Well, when I was young, when at school, 12, 13, 14, I became really very enthusiastic about the theatre. The theatre was my passion. And we lived in a small industrial town in the Midlands where there was no theatre, but a professional company came once every 3 weeks and put on a play for 3 nights. So I'd cycle there in the evening and cycle back at night and just became absorbed in the theatre and wanted to be an actor. I got married, had a child, needed a job, so I joined the BBC I directed in the theatre. I joined the BBC as a director. I knew nothing about it, knew nothing about television at all, and did a course for 6 weeks and there was one, that was about joining the BBC. It was about how to fill in the forms if you wanted, whatever you wanted. Nothing about directing. And except for one morning, we had a lecture entitled What to Do with Your Cameras. And that was all the lessons we had. And within a few weeks, I was doing live television drama. I felt I should be in the theatre. That was the noble art, and television was a kind of popular, lesser means of art form, which was very pretentious of me. I mean, it was really silly because, of course, television was extraordinarily interesting and valuable and could be very imaginative. But my first stroke of luck was getting into that job, which I didn't deserve, but I got in. And for a few years, we scandalized the nation by telling stories, experiences of people. There was a story about a homeless family, a story about a backstreet abortion because abortion was illegal. Stories that shocked the establishment, and many complaints. And we had a good supporter in the BBC who stood by us, and that's what really convinced me or showed me that film could be the most exciting medium of all. For us, it's about finding a group of characters in a situation where there's a fundamental conflict, there's an unresolved conflict, an unresolved contradiction. Something isn't right within that group of characters. And if you tell that story very simply and just follow what happens to them, that contradiction unravels. And so the knot is untied, and the story is untying the knot. But also the group of characters should have a significance beyond just that little sequence of events, so that it indicates a kind of a wider picture of the world they live in. So just by a handful of characters going through a struggle and a conflict and a resolution, you understand something about their world. The stories you tell reflect, in the end, what you think is important. And every film does that. It does it by default. Most American films tell stories not that the directors think are important, but the writers, what the studios think are important. And that's about their profits, is the first thing, and it's about the things that preoccupy them. And for a lot of people, it's what's important is trying to understand the way we live and why we live in the way we do. And so I suppose the stories we've chosen are the ones that reflect a view of society and a view of history about why are we here at this moment, you know, this point in 2019, in the way the world is, the conflicts, the collapsing environment, the rise of the far right, the struggle that working class people have just to survive. Why are we here? Why are we at this moment? But the particular issues are you know, exist in families. We could go outside now and we'd meet families that embody that plight that we're in. But within that little story, that whole history is contained. So I suppose that's the driver, really, is trying to find those little moments of contemporary life that actually reflect that whole history. In Sorry We Missed You, it's about what people call the gig economy, that is casualised work, precarious work. People who are, like in the film, a driver for a delivery company, and yet he's basically a worker for a delivery company, and yet they call him self-employed. You know, he's meant to be an owner-driver franchisee. I mean, it's nonsense. He's just a driver. But he carries all the burden. He's got no holiday pay. He's got no sick pay. He's got no pension. He's entirely vulnerable. And his partner, Debbie, is a care worker, looks after old people in their homes, the most delicate, important job. And she's paid nothing. She's paid nothing. And again, she can be phoned up the night before and say, sorry, you're not working. No money. So it's about that precarious living. I don't know, really. I mean, I think sometimes they have more impact than we imagine. And sometimes they just don't catch fire. You know, you can work just as hard and make as good a film or as bad a film, and it doesn't catch a light with the people, and sometimes it does. That's to do with timing, it's to do with whether people are receptive or not, and it's to do with whether the film's any good or not as well. And the last one had much more impact than we imagined. An impact on people's perception, on their understanding of the cruelty inflicted on people who are desperate for support. But it didn't change anything politically, because to change politically, you've got to take political power. Things won't change just by convincing a cinema audience. It depends what that cinema audience does with that view you've passed on. If they accept it, what are they going to do about it? Because they have to make the change. A film is just a film. For anyone who writes, anyone involved in communication, whether it's film, theatre, writing, journalism, doing what this platform is doing, novelists, poets, artists, there's a role, and that's to assert the fundamental principles that should guide us. Well, the films that inspire you are the ones when you're beginning, you know, because your ideas are more fluid then, and in the process of working, you hammer out an aesthetic, you hammer out a process, and you, by trial and error, by making a lot of mistakes, you in a way, you make your own little manifesto in your head for filmmaking. So the ones that influence you are the ones when you're forming that. So the ones that touched me were the European films of the 50s and the 60s. And there have been lots of good films made since. I mean, I don't put those down, but they're not the ones that had the impact on me. So the ones, it was the Italian films of the 50s, you know, the Seeker and Bicycle Thieves and those. The East European films I liked a lot. The kind of enthusiasm of the French New Wave, you know, some of that, the energy of it, the excitement of it, the enjoyment of the medium. So that has an influence. But after that, you have to work it out for yourself. I think that it's always the same story, really. It's other versions of the same story, of possibilities betrayed. You know, I mean, how far back do you go? You know, go back to the Russian Revolution. Great possibility betrayed. Post-war, great possibility. When people had fought the war, in all the countries, had whether they were amongst those who thought they'd won or those who thought they'd lost, people had come together, and they'd suffered collectively, they'd worked collectively. And in our country, we had a whole series of big changes. The utilities, a lot of little things came into common ownership. You know, we owned it: water, gas, electric, transport, coal mines, steel, post office, common education for everyone, health service. I mean, we owned a great deal, given away to rich people for almost nothing. What an opportunity betrayed. And we've got to learn the lessons from that, you know, not fall into the same traps again. So it's always that story, with different characters. But I'm only sitting here as a director because of the writers I've worked with, and that the biggest heresy I see now amongst film directors is they think they can do it on their own. They can't. The most creative person on a film is the writer. The writer starts with a blank sheet of paper, and usually film directors are not writers because it's a different talent. It would probably a lesser talent, actually, because to write characters and language, with the words people speak, a good writer, you can write, and I've worked with 3 or 4. So I'm Paul Laverty, who I've worked with for a quarter of a century now. He's a wonderful writer. A great guy, comrade, friend, pal, but a wonderful writer. I mean, he can write 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, and you know the people who are saying the words. Now, film directors will write the dialogue they want to happen, to enable the scene to take place. But the lines don't live, you know, and that's an intangible quality. It's kind of sterile and it's lifeless. So respect the writer, find a writer. When you find a writer, hang on to them, because they are the essence of the film. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson is read history. Just know why are you in this situation? Why are we in this situation? And then you know what stories to tell. You can tell a million stories, but why tell that story unless it has some significance, you know? Second lesson. Third lesson, just use the technology to release the people in front of the camera. Don't tell them to, when they, I mean, used to, after, you say that line, you tap the ash off your cigarette, you turn to face the right, you see the man, don't do that. Just let them be, you know, just put them in the situation, and they'll show you things you couldn't imagine. So respect the people in the film. Don't burden them with technology. The first job of a director, once you've respected the writer, once you've found the people who'll bring the story alive, is you've got to create a happy environment. A miserable environment, people close up, they'll give you nothing. Make them a happy environment where people are working hard. It's to do with constructive work, creative work. They'll give you everything, and they will share everything, and then you can work well. But if it's about your ego, then please go home, because we don't need it. You have to make yourself the least important person on the set, because you've got to make certain everyone else is happy, and you've got to know everybody has the first name. And the first name you learn is the person you expect to be the least important. You begin by knowing his name or her name, and then learn everyone else's name. And if you've got people we call, I wish we didn't call them, we was called extras on a film, you know, learn their names first when they come in. because if everyone else sees you treat them with respect, they will treat them with respect. And then everyone's happy. You know, so that's the fourth lesson. Dear God, I don't know, I feel like a vicar here standing in church. I don't know. You'll have to make up the rest, really.
Voor meer informatie ga naar cinetree.nl. Daar vind je nog meer masterclasses, meer originals en natuurlijk hele mooie films. Zoals I, Daniel Blake van Ken Loach. Doei!